Well, if you want a better client, build a better client. I'm a consultant, first and foremost. I'm also an accredited trainer with ISACA. I'm a staunch believer in the idea that it's people, process, everything else, and then technology, a distant third, fourth, etc. The analogy I often give folks is that when you need a new roof on your home, you don't hire the hammer. The hammer comes with the roofer, and it's the competency of the roofer that matters more than the hammer they're swinging. From the client perspective, it doesn't matter how we got there. The client is expecting X, and we are legally obligated to deliver Y. The best case scenario is that you smooth it over and move forward, but more than likely, you know that you've damaged the relationship with the client. If you're not reaching out to demonstrate value, then the relationship is going to be stagnated. Say what you're going to do what you said you were going to do, and as you say, do it consistently. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Aim for underpromising and over-delivering, but only by, a sufficient amount.
Welcome to this episode of MSP Insider. I'm super excited for this ad hoc episode with my guest today because we're going to bring a real and raw unscripted conversation about some dialogue that we had that started online actually yesterday. So first of all, welcome to the show, Mike. Mike, please, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and why the hell you do it?
Sure. So I'm a consultant, first and foremost, primarily to organizations in the small to mid-market space. I provide fractional and virtual CISO services. I'm also an accredited trainer with ISACA. So I teach their risk management certification, their security management certification, and their IT audit certification. I also teach CISSP, Security Plus, and other subjects. And of course, ad hoc, generalized risk management and cybersecurity content, so including awareness content. So I'm also a chapter board member for ISACA and a chair for the privacy SIG for ISSA here in Colorado.
Nice. So with that long list of things, right, like we can go in a really defensible way, really navigating this conversation. I usually like to premise or preface for the audience too, like it's actually why that first question structured the way it is, like why the hell do you do what you do? And I think that helps elicit the here's why and here's what and all of those components. So ideally teeing this off for the audience, if they weren't aware of you before, it's like, hey, backed by actually done some stuff is really the goal here. So I appreciate you coming on and looking forward to the conversation. How we start these episodes in the show structure, really the only structure we really bring to it actually is a little bit of a double blind game where the previous guest on the show leaves behind a question for the next guest. And so I want to start the show by posing the question to you. And the question actually came from, I don't want to butcher the actual question, so I'm going to pull it up. But the question comes from Nick Wolf over at Cork. And his question was, how do you put your clients' minds at ease if you're worried that your vendor is going to be sold to another bigger vendor that they don't like?
It's a delicate balance, I think, between trying to assuage their concerns about the larger organization, even though you can't necessarily you can't erase those concerns. It's one thing if the concerns are completely unfounded based on information that isn't accurate or isn't related to the particular company. But realistically speaking, you're not there to change their minds. You're just there to comfort them or console them in that space. And I think the biggest thing from my perspective, the thing I've tried to do over the years is just to make sure that my clients understand, hey, I'm not changing. I'm still a part of this process. My team is still a part of this process. Our product structure may change in small and potentially meaningful ways, but realistically, you're still going to get the same folks, and we're going to go through this process together. And I think that it's that collaborative, that partnership approach that clients historically respond well to. And I think that's the best thing you can do in that process, while recognizing yourself that they may still leave, they may still sever that relationship because it's just too big an issue, and try not to let that get in the way of the service you provide as well.
Yeah, I love that answer too, because at the heart of it, what I'm hearing you say too is that, like, at the end of the day, it's still people and people, right? And I was on a conversation even earlier this morning where I was distilling something down to someone, and that's the basis of what the conversation ended up as. It's like people are still people, human to human, and so if you can distill sales in that context down to Like it's really just people relating to, helping, servicing, showing up, delivering, and managing expectations for other people. I think that helps humanize a situation, like one vendor acquiring another vendor, or one service provider acquiring another service provider, which isn't rare by any means in our uh, industry either, too, right? So like the concern is valid and the situation is real, but I like where you took it, where if you can distill it back to and bring it back down to just people, having relationships with people, I think is where you can really lean into kind of driving down attrition or driving up retention through uncertain times like that.
Well, I think it's the way you have to conduct your service, right? And you shouldn't change that process. You know, I won't say it's a trivial thing being acquired by a larger organization. It's anything but trivial.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that you conducted your service for these clients shouldn't change by virtue of that, you know, that acquisition. So I think I'm a staunch believer in the idea that it's people, process, everything else, and then technology, a distant, you know, third, fourth, et
Mm.
cetera.
Yeah.
The analogy I often give folks is that, you know, when you need a new roof on your home following a hailstorm or something of you know, similar, you don't hire the hammer. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Right.
The hammer comes with the roofer, and it's the competency of the roofer that matters more than the hammer they're swinging.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great analogy, and timely for me too, because I just went through that this last storm season, and so it's all still prevalent. And I can remember the criteria that I was using when trying to select the roofer, because much like any other industry, and security is no different. Like there's a there's a difference between like the ambulance chasing version, right, versus the maybe the community entity who's been around for 40 years. It's generationally owned, or maybe it's a national chain still, but like there's one of my biggest criteria was like the longevity of it,
Mhm.
right? Like didn't want the trunk slammer, didn't want the
Right,
ambulance chaser, wanted someone who I knew would be there next season if there was an issue with it.
right.
Because to your point, like swinging the hammer didn't matter. Odds are they didn't even use the same crew by the next time they went to the next house to swing the hammer either, but they stood behind what they were doing and how they delivered the service and to what degree, they stripped the roof down. And like you could really look and see maybe the other point, which is process.
Yep.
One of the things I learned was like people, process, execution, and you do need to get the first two right. And if you do, then like the only thing that matters is the third one, except for like iterating and refining and making it better along the time. But the execution is like the thing that separates most of it in the end. Obviously, you won't need to be executing against the process and with the people and that kind of stuff. But I do like that framework that you brought up too, which really kind of transitions a bit. If I think about where we've been speaking so far, it's like really expectations, communication, and execution, people, process, execution. One of the first topics that you wanted to bring up and really had some thoughts around was um, the frequent and all too common disconnect between what's actually in an MSA and what actually gets sold, right?
Yeah, and I want to be fair when I say this because it's entirely too easy, and it's almost got its own gravitational pull to start throwing blame around in that sort of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work for an organization where there was sort of the Hatfields and the McCoys between sales and
Yeah,
professional services, right?
right.
And you know, in the time that I was there, we built I'm going to say an uneasy pact where
Mm,
any proposals that went out to a client or a prospect came through professional services first, but it was sort of an uneasy thing because we were sure that the salesperson would uh, uh, be drawn to thin it to win it, right? Like
yeah,
this is what we think it's going to require, but sales needs to sell it. And
yeah.
so, you know, we have to recognize that there's going to be some degree of negotiation, but is
Mm-hmm.
there enough time for us to deliver things, et cetera? So, like I
Yeah.
said, it's very easy and almost natural to start falling down that path.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say is, from the client perspective, it doesn't matter how we got there. When we run into a situation where the client is expecting X
Yeah.
and we are legally obligated to deliver Y, and it's usually a subtraction operation, not an addition operation in those cases,
Mm-hmm.
then the best case scenario is that you smooth it over and move forward, but more than likely, you know that you've damaged the relationship with the client, and they
Mm-hmm.
may not be so eager to renew the contract or
Yeah.
pursue that next project.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I've been a huge proponent of over the years is everybody in the conversation has to be crystal clear. I'll give you a really good example, or what I think is a really good example. I suppose that's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
um, Several years ago now, when 800 became a soft requirement of any organizations that had any relationships with the Department of Defense and Department of Defense contractors, there was a requirement to self attest to compliance with that 171 standard. And I was at the time running a consulting practice, a security consulting practice for an MSP,
Mm-hmm.
and our clients would come to us and say, hey, I need to do this self attestation. I need a copy of the MSP's information security policies so I can, they don't know how to put this into these words, but their idea was that they were going to take that policy from the MSP, which is doing all things IT for them, and they're paying for
Mm-hmm.
that service, and then just copy and paste that over their response for that self attestation. And I had the dubious honor of engaging in that conversation to say, hey, it doesn't work that way. Our
Yeah.
policy is our policy. Your policy is your policy. That's what's being asked for here. And if you don't have a policy, well, that's a different conversation. We should engage professional services for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't count the number of times that I got the response that said, I thought you guys did all things
Yeah.
IT. This is very clearly an IT, ITIS
Mm-hmm.
sort of issue. So, yes, but no, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
there's a nuance there that of course doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
talked about during the wooing process, during the process of getting that organization to sign the contract with the MSP. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm not trying to place any inordinate amount of blame on an MSP in that sort of relationship. It's just you never know what questions you should have asked
Mm-hmm.
until after the fact, right?
Yeah. Right.
Um, and so part of my mission as a consultant has sort of been as a consultant whisperer to a lot of organizations in that small and mid-market space to say, yes, I'm coming to you as a consultant, but I also want to help you understand this is what you're going to get in no uncertain terms, that there's
Mm-hmm.
no ambiguity here. This is what your expectations should be, so on and so forth, so that we don't get to the other side where it's renewal time and I want more money from you again. And you say, well, but you didn't do this thing.
Yeah.
Well, I never said I would do that thing, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
I explicitly told you that that thing wasn't necessarily in scope under the terms of that agreement, or that I couldn't. Again, I
Yeah.
can't make my policies, my organization's policies, your policies. Now, I'm willing to give you a template and you can make your policies look exactly like my
Mm-hmm.
policies, but it's yours that are going on when you do things like self attestation for 171.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things I want to unpack there because I do believe it to be true and my experience as well, not from the security side of things as much, just because I was on the MSP side. Naturally, I dealt with it, but I was no expert at it. Um, and and while that's true, like it didn't matter if it was security or something else. The true value sort of collected and pooled into the context, what I call in the space between, right? Like the space between the interpretation of the MSA or the assumption that was made about the MSA, the lack of clarity, and maybe drilling down all the way to the answer that they needed, or restating it in a different way that could be better understood. And as you were walking through like the how and the what of even the attestation, self attestation or anything else, like the thing I always remember coaching to my account management arm and also the sales arm too, but was, if you ever find yourself in the conversation or in a conversation that's already talking about the contract, then you've already lost. And this would be for a current client, right? Like if we're having to go to the contract to structure and frame a conversation with our current customer, sure, with a prospect too, but with the customer, like we've already lost trust, we've lost respect, we've lost the like faith component of the in between. Like we shouldn't have to have a conversation about the black and whites of what's between this sentence and that sentence, or this comma and that period, because it's really about like the faith and the trust in the relationship too, right? And that was the part that I really heard you say, um, that came through, and it really rung true, because like I coached on that a lot, where it was like, you come, hey, they sent me this email, read this email, right? Okay, great. It's like, hey, let me see the MSA, or right here in line 73, number 12A
Right.
B1, and it's just like, guys, we need to take control of this conversation and redirect it now, to, even if it was the thing that we said, and find the spirit of it rather than the letter of the law of it, and never come at the conversation like, well, we say, well, in line number 75,
Right.
which you didn't read, like, man, talk about the easiest way to just absolutely lose the relationship entirely,
Totally
even
agree.
if that means, waiting until it expires. So hopefully I did that justice, or did that service of your point there, without misconstruing it. But man, I saw that play out time and time again.
Oh
Where
yeah, and I completely agree with the idea that if we're down to, you know, divvying up the furniture in the divorce, then like it's over, right? We're not
yep,
going to be able
yeah,
to
yeah,
save
yeah,
that relationship.
yep,
Um, sort of somewhat conversely, but also I think related is I genuinely believe the vast majority of MSPs, and when I say MSP, I don't mean some amorphous thing. I mean the
mm-hmm.
individuals involved in that MSP operation. They want to provide the service, right? If a client comes to us and says, I need XYZ, we want
Mm-hmm.
to be able to provide that service. The first question is it included? Is it not? Is this an opportunity
Yeah,
for expansion of the relationship, or is this professional services engagement is already in our catalog? Because of all the things behind the scenes, the
mm-hmm.
machinations of is there resourcing concerns? Is this something we can even deliver on? Are we even capable of delivering on? Or does it require bringing somebody into the organization, so on and so forth? So anyway, that the first stage gate, but never is it, no, I don't want to. It's
Mm-hmm.
always, I want to be able to provide service to this
Mm-hmm.
client. I want to be able to solve their problem for them. That's
Yeah,
part of our personalities in this particular space. Not
mm-hmm.
specifically MSPs, but I think the collective whole of our practitioner based industry. So
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree, and I also completely agree with the idea that, especially if the client starts this. Anecdotally, I got pulled into a conversation at the 11th hour with a client that was already talking about termination for cause. And the way it was framed to me was, hey, it's still early on in the process. We need you to jump in and smooth things over and make sure that we can get this relationship back on track. And let's do this. I've done this
Yeah,
many times in the past. I'm kind of proud of my ability to smooth things over with clients. Let's do this. And so I
mm-hmm.
joined the conference call, and the first words out of the client were, here is the list of reasons we're going to terminate this contract. And I
Right,
thought, hey guys, it's too late. Like it's
yeah,
over, right? Like
yeah,
we're polishing brass on the Titanic
right,
at this point. So
yep,
um, we did save the relationship, at least for another term, which was really good. But to your point exactly, when they come with evidence and they come with proof,
mm-hmm.
you have two choices. You start arguing the proof, which
Yeah,
nobody wins,
right,
right?
mm-hmm.
Or find the equitable split. Find
Mm-hmm.
the, here's the compromise. If you must go, it's been super awesome. But
Yeah,
if otherwise, let's see what we can do to salvage this.
yeah, and I love that, the spirit of that too, because there were, I don't want to say many to make it seem like it was proliferant, but there were many conversations in the end that I was in, sort of on the tail end of conversations too, right? Like, you weren't the saver, you weren't the closer in that regard, but it was like, we'll at least get to clarity in
Yeah.
the exit process, if you will. And there were a lot of times, and I don't live in like a tier one city or anything, right? I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, so I don't know, 1 million people in the greater Omaha area. Basically, there's a handful of MSPs that essentially are kind of all roughly the same tier, capacity, quality, whatever, competitors. And so it wasn't uncommon to have the consumer base, or the prospects or clients or whatever, just like kind of go through the rotation too, of MSPs back and forth. But one of the things that I was proud of instilling in the MSPs that I was a part of was like, we will always make the offboarding experience the absolute best part of the process for any customer that makes that decision. Now, yes, we'll do everything we can to try to save it. We'll do everything we can to not put ourselves in a situation where that's happening, but also like we're not going to throw sand in their eyes on the way out, because they will, well, we'll leave ourselves the opportunity for them to come back, right? Because the grass isn't always greener. Someone else will make the same mistakes. Someone else may not necessarily jive with them. Like, it's still just a people business and a relationship business. And being able to take a situation like you described, where it's like, here's the laundry list of the reasons why we've already left you, even though we're still in the house with you, is really then about going to work not to win or lose the conversation, and not to debate the black and whiteness of, you know, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. It's like, you have to get to understand, well, what was it in the dynamic of the relationship that caused you to even start keeping score to begin with? Right. And then, do we have a place to work from there? But the personalities that I feel I experienced more often than not, again, on the practitioner side, was we almost unknowingly and unintentionally put on the right, wrong, black, white, binary, like, debate mentality, rather than the seeking to understand, rather than be understood. And I wonder if you could unpack your experience around that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't want to, I want to say this judiciously, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, but I wholeheartedly want to say this, that our industry is filled with a lot of egos. And some of them more fragile than others. But that drive to, I am correct, I am right. You're absolutely right. That is a part of our, that's a part of our ethos. And it's something that the entirety of my career in, you know, IT and IS, which is rapidly approaching a quarter of a century now, is I've always tried to fight that. You know, what do you get out of that? You know, the old stereotype with the Jimmy Fallon character on SNL. You know, move. I'll take care of it. What do we get out of that? How does that help our cause in any way, shape, or form? You know, and so I do think that there's a lot of that. I must be right. I must defend. You know, whatever. I must defend the situation. Now, if I can, one thing I want to put out there is that, you know, we're talking about the dissonance between, or the potential dissonance between what the client thinks they're going to get out of the service provider and what the service provider is legally obligated to deliver. And my personal opinion is that if you look at the contract, the MSA, or even a statement of work agreement for a project-based deliverable, that is the definition of the liability on the part of the service provider. So first and foremost, it behooves you to make sure that you get it right, get everything out in the open. If you need client participation for a thing to succeed, make sure they understand that before signature hits the document, right? But I'm also going to put out there that in the pursuit of avoiding those conversations, those ugly conversations where we're deciding who gets what furniture again, I always lean on the phrase, build a better client. I hear a lot of folks, a lot of practitioners in the space, gosh, I wish my clients were smarter. Gosh, I wish they did this better. I wish they knew about X, Y, and Z. I wish they were experts in the things that I'm an expert in, or whatever. And well, if you want a better client, build a better client, right? If you want them to know a thing, you want them to do a thing, pick up the phone, call them up. Some specific example, and this is several years ago now, there was an issue bouncing around in the operations side of the house at an MSP I was working with, about a client had reached out to recover data from systems that we were hosting, the MSP was hosting. And our default policy was to keep backups for 3 weeks. And the client was asking for something longer than that, right? And it became a shouting match over who was responsible for making sure that we knew that the client needed something, needed backups longer than 3 weeks. And, you know, I entered the conversation somewhat, you know, from outside, and I was like, instead of worrying about whose fault it is, right? How about
Hmm.
we just establish the culture of asking the question? You know,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
this client, this situation's kind of lost, right? This is going to be
Hmm.
handled a different way. We can't magically manifest the
Right.
data from the period of time they need. But every other client in the client list should get a phone call in the coming week to say, "Hey, just checking in,
Mm.
this is our default behavior. Is that sufficient?" Not least of which because every client that says no and they want more
Hmm.
backups, longer backups is an opportunity to sell storage space.
Yeah.
And they'll take it. That they'll accommodate that cost.
Hmm.
And so again, and from the other side of the coin, from the client perspective, if you as a client are unsure about a thing, I'm not sure if my security policies are up to snuff. I don't know
Yeah.
what this particular vulnerability that's floating around in the news is. Like, what the heck is DeepSeek? Do I need to do anything with this? Right?
Yeah. Right.
Pick up the phone and call the MSP. Have that dialogue. Have that conversation. I had
Hmm.
so many. I don't want to lean on this, but I had so much billable time with my clients over the years that came down to a conversation. I'm going to give it to
Hmm.
them at a discounted rate. I'm not really doing any real work. We're just talking about a thing,
Yeah.
but they're getting value out of. I have somebody I can call who's an expert on this thing, and they help me achieve my goals before it's an issue,
Hmm.
before I'm trying to resurrect data from a period that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So, again, avoid that breakup by doing service to the relationship.
Hmm.
There's no other way to phrase that, even though we're not talking about a personal relationship. We're talking about a business relationship. The dynamic
Yeah.
is the same.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there too, because if I understand it correctly and read it back to you too, you're really talking about being intentional about zeroing in on what the outcome is that they're trying to get to, even though they're not necessarily asking about the outcome. They might be asking about what they believe the process or the sequence or the steps or the methodology of getting to the outcome is. And as the experts or the leader or whatever our role is in the dynamic of the relationship, it's our responsibility to help them define and understand what their outcome, the desired outcome is. Like, what's the success criteria? Maybe they have it, maybe they don't when they start the conversation. But I always saw that on the troubleshooting side of the world, and the tech service side of the MSP space too, where it was like the stated problem was very rarely actually the problem, right? It was like the symptom or the byproduct or the implication of the problem that was existing. And so if a junior technician or a fresh technician or even a senior one forgets to like stop and ask the right questions before you even start going into troubleshooting, then you find exerting all this heroic level of output, and while you may have like restored to baseline, like we didn't actually deliver on the outcome they wanted because we didn't classify it appropriately. Meaning, and a good example I usually use is the printer stuff. Like, printer ticket comes in, and whatever, it's a high priority ticket and it needs to be working again by noon. Well, that could be seen as the problem is the printer's broken or not working or whatever. But unless you ask the right questions of like understanding, okay, well, do you have another printer in the building? Can you use that for this particular job? In the meantime, while I work through these other things, you'll start to understand like, well, what if it was to print board packets for a board meeting at noon and it's the only printer, or maybe it was for payroll and it's the only printer that does micker paper. And so like it needed to be ran through this one thing. Well, like the problem we're solving for is people getting paid.
Right.
The symptoms, the implications, all the stuff inside it is like, yeah, this one particular printer is throwing a fit because of Windows updates or whatever. But I found that was more common than not. I don't know if it runs into some of the same characteristics or not, but similar to what you were describing about, not beginning from the mutually understood outcome and then working backwards from that. And I
Yeah,
think,
is it a symptom or is it an illness, right?
yeah,
You think about even in our daily interactions. Say you go to a restaurant, and the person who takes your order isn't necessarily the person who uh, delivers your food, right? And
mm-hmm,
you look across the table and you want ranch dressing or whatever at the table. The person who delivered your food is a food runner. They have no obligation to
yeah,
you. They don't, they're not a part of the process, they're not a part of the traditional process, right?
Right.
This is my person. This is the person who took my order. This is the person who's going to receive the tip when I pay the bill,
Hmm.
et cetera. But if that
Yeah.
person comes back super quick with, a bucket of ranch for you or whatever, right? You think highly of that person because they handled that process. I think it to your point exactly. What is the problem we're trying to solve here? And don't
Hmm.
get too mired in it, right?
Right.
You have to strike that balance, but hey, there's another printer in another part of the building. I'm going to go get that printer and I'm going to bring it here because they don't need it today. You need one today.
Hmm.
And then I'll work on this other issue, right?
Yeah.
I think that those are the things solving the problem, not the symptom, is
Hmm.
a phenomenal way to resolve that issue or not resolve the issue, but nurture the relationship and
Yeah.
bolster the relationship.
Yeah, I think something critical I don't want to get missed in your food example too is, to your point, like I don't see the food runner as my server. I don't associate the food runner's like implication on, for example, the tip that I would give the server,
Yeah,
except they do impact the experience that I had there, right? And the experience will impact how gratuitous I am, I guess, at the end of the
yeah,
day too. And so like if you have training process or whatever, as it relates to something as simple as bring me more ranch dressing, if they roll their eyes, walk away from the table and forget to bring it and forget to tell the server to bring it to you, like
right,
that's impacting your experience. Much like if they were trained and conditioned to lean in and bring you two instead of one because you only asked for one, right? They've
right.
over delivered on expectation. And in a service based business, which is what MSPs are, whether we like to admit it or not, we're not tech companies, right? We're service companies in the tech space. And oftentimes the experience that we deliver is overlooked at a process and an intentionality
Hmm.
level too, because again, most MSPs, not all, but a lot, start with that owner that wanted to do it for themselves versus someone else. And like they just kind of grew and now you have some people and you got some clients and all that, but you never really sat down long enough to distill exactly how you go through your own decision matrix in every situation into company process that's then trained off into all of your senior or junior level people to even know if someone asked me for extra ranch dressing, maybe we pivot back to an IT conversation. It's like maybe they ask me to help solve these 7 other things while I'm on site here today. But
Yeah,
what's the process to handle that to
right.
impact the highest quality experience or expectations and like save face or gain, as David Powell would say, like the trust capital? I used to always call it the goodwill bucket. Like, how do we intentionally create the decisions we make such that we're always adding to the goodwill bucket? Because we know that thing
Yes.
is going to get drained someday.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't ever thought of it as a goodwill bucket, but you're absolutely right. Especially in the consulting space, and especially as a solopreneur or startup founder, et cetera, you recognize that every relationship is very nearly pivotal to the
Mm-hmm.
success of your organization.
Yeah.
And so I'd always had the idea that or had the notion that the only time a client is going to be truly disgruntled, right, uh, is when is when the only communication they receive from you is your invoice, right?
Hmm.
If you're not reaching out to say, hey, this happened, this is what I did, and it was solved or it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not reaching out to demonstrate value, to bring attention to that value, then the relationship is going to be stagnated, and
Mm-hmm.
and again, they're going to be disinclined to renew that relationship. And so, and it's good people behavior. Hey, how are you doing? I
Mm-hmm.
want to follow up on this thing that happened last week, or whatever. Right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be small talk. How's your family? How's your ma? It
Mm-hmm.
can be I'm following up on a ticket, or I'm following up on an issue, or hey, there's a thing floating around in the news. I need you to understand. This is what I need you to know about it. Don't worry. Let's
Mm-hmm.
bring down the anxiety level, et cetera. Again, you've done almost nothing. I don't want to
Right.
trivialize that outreach, but you've done almost nothing from a deliverable perspective other
Mm-hmm.
than demonstrating value to the client. And that's you have to
Right.
maintain that.
Yeah, and so much of a service-based business too, right? It's qualitative more than quantitative. It's the experience, it's the emotion, it's the relationship. It's how do your clients feel about the equal exchange of energy in the dynamic of the relationship. Actually, I've never heard it put that way, but I love it. Where like, if your only interaction with your client this month was the invoice, like, you might want to question how you're doing things. Now,
Right.
we're also, as MSPs, like, shoved against the grindstone of, well, one, because we probably didn't price our agreements correctly, we haven't gone and resold them appropriately, like, but anyways, like, the margin is the sort of the golden goose, right? And
Hmm.
and it's tight, and so that forces the way we look at things, like the frame that we look at the business through, also through, I want to spend as little time with all of my clients as possible to maintain this gross margin thing. And it's like, well,
Yes.
that's just like chopping off your nose to spite your face. Because what happens when 100% of that 11% margin client goes away because the only time they saw you was when you sent the invoice? And I wish that more MSPs could zoom out far enough, long enough, take a deep enough breath to be like, what is best practice telling me? How does my tummy tell me I should feel about that? And then how do I want to apply that to my own business too?
Right.
Rather than just like taking the cookie cutter and slamming it on top of our business and then scratching your head trying to hit certain numbers for certain reasons.
Yep. Totally. Yeah, and I think that was sort of the genesis of the conversation that we started yesterday was
Mm-hmm.
there's a prevailing notion of a consolidation of the MSP market. I was floored yesterday. I did a quick search for number of MSPs in the state of Colorado, and because I was thinking through my head. I mean, I can think of a couple, three or five that are based in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
but Info MSP came back with 584, and I thought that's magnitudes higher than
Yeah.
I could have put pen to paper. And I'm in this space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like I should know this. And I think there's probably some liberal application of the definition of MSP for
Sure.
some of these organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but still, even if it's only a tenth, even if it's only 54, that's still a pretty competitive market.
Yeah.
So, how do you reconcile? This is a somewhat rhetorical question, but reconciling the need to grow the business
Mm-hmm.
against the, you know, borderline biological imperative to provide good service. You know that you're going to spend 80% of your time on 20% of your clients, and they're not the 20% that pay the highest bill each month. It just never is the case.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? How do you put those two things together? So my hot take was, I don't think it's going to be it's not the optimal. It's not the MSPs that I want to continue to be the bastions of quality service,
Mm-hmm.
the gold standard of quality service. I'm bitter. I'm old. I'm cynical at this point. So I just don't know that I think that's the case. I think it's the MSPs that are able to thread the needle to navigate the pressures of operating a business, especially in a highly competitive market.
Mm-hmm.
That has to come first.
Yeah.
Now, if they can still adhere to quality and best practices, hey, then they earned it. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always sure that's what I'm seeing out in the space.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with Dean Trimpelis over at Empath Now, probably 2 weeks ago or so. And we spent a lot of time having this fairly flagrant conversation too about like the thing that MSPs are chasing and whether or not it's not right or wrong, because it's not that it's right or wrong. It's your business, do what you want. But it's like the standard to which we're pursuing leaves us with what, right? And his take was, or his point was, we all strive, not all, well, we, we all strive to deliver that heroic level of service, right?
Mhm.
And while that's great, grand, noble, and everything else, like, in the end of the day, when you go over and beyond to deliver for a customer, you're ultimately harming the entire relationship, because it isn't about those one or two moments or consistent moments about being heroic. It's ultimately, can you deliver consistency
Mhm.
like forever? Like, what is your baseline, and is your baseline good enough? But if without the consistency component, it doesn't really matter if you can flip the heroic switch and like over deliver for this one moment, because you're sort of training them in the wrong direction too.
Right.
And so like the staying power, if you will, and he related it to the restaurant industry actually as an example too, He used like McDonald's and he used Chick-fil-A as decent examples of, you have a crystal clear expectation of what you're going to get when you go there. And so long as they deliver at the baseline, even when they don't, right? The drive-through might take an extra 10 minutes or something. You're willing to let that go until it always takes 10 minutes longer than it should in the drive-through. And now the baseline's different. And now you're like, okay, I'm not going to the slow Chick-fil-A anymore. I'm going to the fast one, is kind of the route that he painted. And I do believe, again, that I have seen time and time again in the MSPs I was a part of, but also peers, where like we pride ourselves, we place this like badge of honor of like, we put the cape on, we are the hero, we want to be heroic, but it's so inconsistent and it's so dependent upon you knowing all the things that you haven't slowed down long enough to give your team to be able to be a hero all the time, every time. And maybe that is your standard, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but the point that I heard you making, and then it reminded me of his conversation, was that the litmus test, the bar, the barrier of entry, so to speak, needs to be your capacity to deliver at a consistent basis routinely,
Right.
to establish that baseline. I don't know if there's any guidance, frameworks, places to start, because I think oftentimes too, we get stuck in our head. We can't get off the X of like, where do I even begin to solve this problem? If there's any, mnemonic devices or anything else you've come across in your time where it's like, if all of what I just described is true and it's me and I'm that 20-person MSP owner and like I don't know where to begin, what's a great 3-step framework to at least get the first draft down on paper?
Well, I mean, I'm going to lean on a theme that we've established throughout this conversation, that we're still dealing with people, right? This is all a relationship with a client, but also to be clear and unambiguous, to manage expectations from the first prospecting conversation through to whatever is the inevitable end of the dialogue during onboarding, right? So say what you're going to do what you said you were going to do, and as you say, do it consistently. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Aim for, under promising and over delivering, but only by, a sufficient amount. And then the third thing I would say would be, you have to be realistic with yourself in terms of what is an option. And I'll give sort of an anecdote here. There was a contract that an organization I was working with was really trying to pursue, and they really wanted an incident response, basically a tiger team apparatus is what the client was asking for. They were based in New York City. The lion's share of my incident response folks was in Colorado. And in the proposal, the client was asking for a no more than 8-hour response. And I raised alarms. I raised hell. I was like, there's no way on God's green earth, unless we're going to start hiring people in New York City. Literal paratroopers, right? Information security paratroopers we can drop into that client's office. There's no way we can accommodate this. And the response back from those who had a vested interest in the recurring revenue, their response was, well, there are airplanes, and we can put somebody on a plane and they can be there within 3 hours. I'm like, no, 3 hours in the air, 2 hours on the ground. You got to wake them up, right? Like this is just mathematically not going to work out. And so, having to bring that realism. Yeah, it's money. Yeah, it's revenue. Yeah, it's an opportunity. Maybe it's the thing that catapults us into a new space. But if you fail in spectacular fashion, right, then you get the polar opposite response in just as great a blast radius. So and I always hear, I've always heard it said multiple times, the old chestnut about you take the pieces of the airplane, you throw them over the side of the plane, side of the building, and you assemble them before you hit the ground. That's the entrepreneur's way. Like how many of them didn't assemble the plane before they hit the ground, right? Statistically, I know it's not zero. So if you want to roll those dice, let's do it. But not quite so much.
Yeah, maybe to wrap a bow on that whole concept too, because I feel like it's hitting a nerve that I had when I was in that space as well, and that was that this is radically generalizing, and I apologize for that, but there were like two groups of people. There were the people that looked at every situation as, here's the 100 reasons why this won't work.
Mhm.
And then there were the ones that would be faced with the same situation, but the question they asked was, how can I make this work?
Yes.
And neither was right or wrong. The most beautiful part was when they came together and the how can
Yes.
I make this work person asked the here's the 100 reasons why. And then all of a sudden you got to this answer you never would have gotten to without the collaboration of minds that way.
Yep.
I think the default propensity tends to be the former. So the here's the 100 reasons why this won't work,
Mhm.
personality, persona, whatever. Have you come across, even in the consulting side, like a great way to neutralize and start a conversation like that can produce a more fruitful outcome outside of something as simple as how can we make this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's the yes if, right?
Mm,
It's so for a long time we were known as the Department of No. In fact, I would say in some respects we're still known as the Department of No.
yeah.
Um, we should not be no. It should be yes if, right?
Mm,
That should be our ethos. I'm a big proponent of looking at information security as purely risk management, not a never ending checklist of this must be done exactly this way because
mm-hmm.
it's consistent with insert framework here or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same sort of scenario where you say, we can do that if, right? And these
Yeah.
are the requirements. And a craft, I already started to say it, so I'm going to lean into it. A crafty or experienced risk practitioner knows how to form that sentence to say,
Mm,
I need you to understand what's at stake. This is what's at stake. This is what there is to gain, right? But this
mm-hmm.
is what's at stake. If the
Yeah.
cons column is three times as high as the pros column, I
Mm,
trust that you'll come to the right decision, and I'm prepared for you to come to the wrong one, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's the easiest answer is to say, yes, if all of these things happen, if we do this, going back to the example of the Tiger team in New York City, hey boss, let's do this,
Mm,
but I need to hire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people on Manhattan salaries living
yeah.
within a quarter-mile radius of this particular client. What does that do to the proposal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Margin vanishes and the organization goes, yeah, you know what, we're just going to totally pass on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they say, let's
Yeah.
do it, it's big money, it's a new market,
Mm-hmm.
um, the yes if, I think, is a thing that needs to be drilled into more information security and information technology folks early and often. It's
Yeah.
not no, it's not the business has asked for this, but the business is ignorant and they don't know what
Mm,
they're talking about, and therefore the answer is going to be no.
yeah.
It's yes if.
Yeah. I love that because I've, even on the support side, right, delivering and the expectation stuff, there was always this component of the thing that we're actually solving for most of the time is the information the other person needs to make their business decision, right? Like well, again, it wasn't about the broken printer. It wasn't about the keyboard that isn't working. It's about paying payroll, right? Or whatever. And so like, how do we put ourselves in a position to keep that at the forefront of our minds where it's like, we're really just here to deliver the business information needed so that they can make their business decision and the best possible business decision at the time. And there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as perfect. It's just like default to action and default to communication. And ideally, that communication is clear, which
Right.
might be part of the challenge. But that's really like the ultimate wisdom. If I strip back all of it, it's like, hey, all 18 years, if I only took one lesson only from being in the MSP space, it probably comes down to that more often than not.
Yeah.
I'm curious your take on that piece. Like ultimately, what was really at stake is like them needing to get to the information they need to make their decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rarely do people know how to formulate the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of us who have been in this particular space have been faced with somebody saying it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What doesn't work? I don't, help. I need more information, right? I need more
Mm-hmm.
input.
Yeah.
To quote
Johnny
Johnny
Five.
Five. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, and so, finding a mechanism for drawing out here, tell me more about what it is you're trying to do. Show me what you were trying to do so that I can see where it fails and
Mm-hmm.
whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And taking that out of that small operational
Hmm.
interaction and applying it to strategic or tactical conversations, I mean, that's aces for a practitioner in the space, and it is table stakes for a
Mm,
consultant as far as I'm concerned.
sure.
I've seen so many people try to come into the consulting space thinking it's exactly the same as like a enterprise administrator or
Hmm.
support role, and just being bowled over. Just the train runs them over, and I
Yeah.
feel bad, right? But
Hmm.
it's you are going to get incomplete information. There's a cat I used to work with named Sam, and one of his most common phrases was, "There's two kinds of people in the world: those who can interpolate from incomplete information."
That belongs on a t-shirt.
So I think it's probably on a couple of
Yeah,
t-shirts,
that's probably
but yeah.
true. That's great.
So anyway, that's
Yeah.
I think that's a part of it should be a part of the ethos for the consultant is, what am I actually being asked for here? And
Mm,
I think that's also the place where, again, relationships between MSPs and clients are won and lost. Is,
yeah.
what do they actually need? What are they looking for? What is the
Hmm.
value that we provide to them, and what does it require to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I've really appreciated the conversation. It brought a different lens to really kind of go back and reflect through, even for me. So hopefully, it's kind of done the same for the audience. There's two things left for you before you go, Mike. First is, if people have enjoyed, how you've been thinking, what you've been asking, what you do, how do people find you, and where should they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would just say look for me on LinkedIn. As a privacy fanatic, it's the only social media that I have left
Yeah.
as part of my professional world. So find me at LinkedIn, Mike Pedrick. I should be relatively easy to find. I think there's only a couple of us in the country with that name, and the other one I think is a FBI agent.
All
So
right. So not that one.
not that one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm happy to interact with anybody at any time about the subject matter.
Okay, awesome. And then the second thing is, you get to ruin the next guest's day by leaving behind a question that they must answer as we open the next show.
What is the one thing you wish your client knew and you don't dare tell them?
Hmm, that's a good one. That'll be great. Awesome. Appreciate it. Again, thank you for coming on, Mike. And thank you to everyone else for tuning in to this episode of MSP Insider.